Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Kari Harvey. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Innovation Saskatchewan, and I am just thrilled to be here today for this first ever National Indigenous Agricultural Innovation Conference and to be moderating today's panel discussion. Before we get into that, I want to just talk a little bit about Innovation Saskatchewan. As I am assuming that there's a few folks out there who aren't sure of what our role is. Innovation Saskatchewan is an economic development agency of government that seeks to advance the province's research and development priorities and supports the growth of the tech sector in Saskatchewan. We were established in 2009, and since then we've funded a whole range of programs that encourage innovation and impacts economic growth. In the last year or so in particular, our focus has really been shifting towards helping to accelerate the growth of one of Saskatchewan's most natural economic strengths, which is, of course, the agriculture technology industry, which we're here to talk about today. As everybody knows, the global population is expected to reach 10 billion people by the year 2050. And with Saskatchewan's rich agricultural tradition of helping to feed the world, we are quite uniquely positioned to continue advancing our knowledge and capability in research, innovation, and technology that facilitates growth in ag tech and value-added ag innovation. So for us, innovation and fostering an environment friendly to commercialization of novel ideas yields economic return for the province and for communities. We see our technology sector aggressively growing over the next decade, and we really feel that Saskatchewan can be a global destination or a world-class ag tech hub, if you will. In fact, we're working hard to meet the government growth plan commitment to triple the tech sector by 2030. It's predicted that by accelerating investments in technology, agriculture has the potential to add 11 billion to Canada's GDP by 2030. That's a pretty significant impact. So it's clear to see why we feel, and many others across the province feel, that this industry will play a significant role in achieving that aggressive Saskatchewan growth target. So the theme of today's panel is investing in ag tech and value-added agriculture. And I'm joined today with three amazing individuals who are disrupting the industry through technology development and finding new value for our agricultural products. Our goal is to provide some insight into the impact of technology on this evolving sector and the opportunities that are emerging for everyone. And so with that, I would like to now introduce our panel. As mentioned, we have three amazing people that you're going to hear from. We're going to hear from Leah Olson, the CEO of Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute, Mark Cooper, President and CEO of Prairie Clean Energy, and Ryan Hutchison, Integrated Solutions Manager with South Country Equipment. So I'm going to ask each of you just to provide, a bit of brief background to yourself and what kind of brings you to this panel today, and then we'll get going with the discussion. So Leah, I'll start first with you.
Okay. Great. So a bit about myself. Yes, indeed, President and CEO of the Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute. We're a fee-for-service research, development, and testing organization based out of Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and also out of Portage La Prairie, Manitoba. So we work with a wide variety of industries, agriculture, mining, and transportation. But we are really excited by what's happening in agriculture, in particular on ag tech, but just the innovation that is helping produce more food and doing it in a very sustainable manner. Grew up on a farm myself, have been involved in the agriculture industry throughout my career, and see real value in terms of the diversity of the agriculture, and feel very honored to be a part of this panel today.
Thanks, Leah. Mark, let's turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Kari. Honored to be here today. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm the CEO of Prairie Clean Energy. Prairie Clean Energy is a new entrant into the Saskatchewan marketplace. We've been in operations for about a year and a half now, and our role is to aggregate flax straw from across the province of Saskatchewan then using what will be a proprietary process, convert these bales of flax straw into flax straw pellets, which we then sell into the global market for industrial biomass power production. And that's a growing and emerging industry across Asia and Europe in particular. And so we're trying to come up with a novel use for flax straw, which today is simply a residue that is typically burned in the field and releasing all of that unproductive carbon here in Saskatchewan. And we're excited about the opportunity that we have to introduce new revenue streams for flax producers, new economic opportunities for Saskatchewan citizens, and a new industry for Saskatchewan to help be a global leader in when it comes to clean energy through ag residue. So really pleased to be here to be part of the panel and listen to my colleagues here and the discussion that we'll have today. Thanks, Kari.
Thanks, Mark. All right, last but not least, Ryan.
Thanks, Kari. So I'm actively the Integrated Solutions Manager for South Country Equipment in Regina, Saskatchewan, and our group is an 8-store independent dealership in southern Saskatchewan. They've been part of the John Deere Dealer Group network for just about 55 years, so there's a long history at South Country Equipment in the John Deere dealership space. We do cover, our trade area is about 7.5 million acres in the southern part of Saskatchewan. So it's a big area we represent, and proud to represent that with the John Deere brand. A little more about myself. I did start in precision ag in about 1996, and actively through that time saw the onset of GPS and guidance systems and weather stations and imagery, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those things today. The last 9 years in my role here at South Country Equipment, as the IS manager, our focus has really been around machine optimization and using the digital tools that are embedded in the large ag product that we handle today through John Deere, and really the insights that come around the use of those tools, be it machine utilization, cost of operation, and such. And something else that's really been a big focus for the last number of years is what I would call third-party collaboration with the data that's coming from our equipment and working with our producers and lenders and risk management and things like that. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm sure we'll talk more through the call today. Thanks, Kari.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. And actually, that is a perfect kind of segue into our first question. And knowing that agriculture has always been an important economic sector for the province, and innovation and technology has been an important driver of the evolution of the sector over the years. And as you touched on it, Ryan, I mean, you have a long history in industry and working with producers. Can you talk a little bit about how the industry has evolved? And I'm going to start with you, Ryan, but Mark and Leah, please feel free to add any comments or add on to what Ryan has to say here.
That's an interesting question. When we had our panel discussion a little earlier, we talked about the history. And when I reflect back on my experience, back to 1996, there was actually the start of some of the innovation in the province where a group had actually set up an AM beacon GPS signal in Watrous and south of Regina, so we could actually get correction before we had auto steer. So, what's changed a lot, we've been through variable rate technologies. I remember being part of FlexiCoil in Saskatoon with some variable rate work long ago to where we are today with auto steer and variable rate. And you think about as a dealership, how we've had to change. Like traditionally, you think of a John Deere dealership or any equipment dealership where you would see parts, sales, and service, but today it's all about technology, it's about data, it's how do we integrate those platforms to other things that the producer may be using. And our tools have changed as well at the dealership level, where we've had to be really open to collaborate with other technologies that maybe we weren't used to in the past as a dealership. So that's how it's impacted the dealership. I think, part of it too is how technology has really benefited the operator in the past. It's been focused around, Leah talked on our previous auto steer makes it so comfortable for the operator to run a piece of machinery today, even if you're an experienced operator, and it takes some of the stress load off, to today where you might put a less experienced operator in the seat, but know that the same quality of job or close to it is being accomplished. And, I see the way the ag tech space is coming. It's also enabling not just the operator, but it's enabling the farm manager, the farm owner, I would say shareholders in the business can now get a live view of what's happening on the farm, both from a production standpoint, maybe a financial standpoint, depending on the level of integration of technology they're using. So it's changed a lot. I can reflect back on the first weather station we installed that had a 3-watt cellular bag phone connected to it using a prepaid SaskTel card. And today everybody carries a smartphone in their pocket and can access the internet as we please. So it's changed a lot, Kari.
Yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts on that, Leah? Particularly in your role with Pami, I'm sure that you have, seen some pretty significant transitions, and just an understanding kind of how we can support producers through technological change as well.
Mm-hmm. I think, it's interesting. Ryan has seen technology really ebb and flow over the, over 20 some years. And I think of, farmers always having a farmer fix that they can, do, and often had to do out of necessity, because when you're in the middle of a field and, you don't have cell phones or you have no cell coverage, you have to take it upon yourself to fix the equipment immediately. Now, you can reach out to your dealership. Everybody's got a cell phone. And so things are quite a bit easier to access a service. However, with ag tech, the mechanics of equipment are, haven't changed significantly over, the last 20 years. There's, we might have 4 tires or we have tracks, but the, root of a tractor has not fundamentally changed. What has changed is the operating system and the electronics and the amount of data that is collected in the agriculture industry, whether in a tractor or otherwise. So I think, the type of entrepreneur that the agriculture industry is needing is very different. And so when we look at ag tech, at the end of the day, it still has to be able to provide either saving time for a farmer, saving him or her money. And if you can do both, then that farmer is definitely going to get excited about whatever technology is being presented. And so as I look at technology and, the people that may not always have an agriculture background, that's where I get super excited to say, come into agriculture. We want your expertise. We want to teach you about what happens in the fields, because if we can use some of your skills, transfer them from another area into agriculture, then the world truly is our oyster. And so that's a bit of what I've seen in the last couple of years in particular, as ag tech has become the new sexy of where to be in terms of economic growth.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Leah. And as we talked a lot in our last in our pre-panel discussion, just about leveling the playing field, right, for entry into the sector, which I think is really interesting. And Mark, and I'm not sure if you have a farming background or not, but you might want to speak to how you got into this. I mean, and how agriculture is touching your life now.
Yeah, it's been I don't have a farming background, and I'm not originally from Saskatchewan, although I've been here for 25 years now. Yeah, but getting involved in an industry that's connected to agriculture and that really is dependent on the success of agriculture has been a fantastic journey for my partners, and I, both of whom do have agricultural background. And I think that the because of our desire to want to support our local communities and create new opportunities for producers in Saskatchewan, the clarity or the opportunity that exists here with flax straw is significant. I mean, we know there's more than 3/4 of a million tons of it every year in the province that simply end up getting burned, and so if we can turn that into something that's productive, both in terms of revenue generation to Leah's point, if we can help these producers make money, if we can help save them some time and some risk by not having to burn it in their fields, I think we provide a great opportunity that they're quite ready to embrace. And so I don't really have anything to add to to the responses that have been provided here by Ryan and Leah on this question, but we do think that we have an opportunity here that our company is providing to producers to help them do exactly what Leah was saying, both make money and save some time.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, Mark. Over the last few weeks, months, we've seen some pretty significant announcements around major investment into value-added infrastructure with respect to whether it be canola crush plants or perhaps wheat straw pulp plant, as well as including your business as well. Can you just speak a bit about doing business in Saskatchewan and what makes it a good place to invest in the ag value added space, and just a bit of your experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Kari. So, I think that we hear from leaders across Saskatchewan talk about the fact that Saskatchewan has the fundamentals of, food, fertilizer, and fuel in place to the things that the world needs. And I don't think that's just rhetoric. I think it's true. And I think the evidence of that is the kinds of announcements that you were referencing and more that are in the pipeline, including some from our company. And so, I think the fact that's the starting point is that Saskatchewan does have what the world needs. Really, when you think about it, agriculture is Saskatchewan's business. Just about everything is a result of the fact that we are world leaders in the agriculture space, and even the alignment of our research institutes, groups like Pami. I mean, the presence of these organizations in our province allow us to be at the cutting edge and to really drive innovation in these fields. And I think that that's really essential. We've got stability of governments at all levels, which is not true of a lot of the jurisdictions, certainly that we're competing against globally. And I think Saskatchewan does a great job really of supporting export-driven businesses like ours, and in terms of opening up new markets and in connecting us with opportunities that exist internally for support and just the infrastructure that exists for funding innovation through organizations like yours, Kari. We've got the layers in place that really allow us to be successful. Conversely, I think one of the layers that we're challenged a bit with in Saskatchewan is the layers of governance. With the significant number of municipalities we have across the province and different approaches to regulations in a lot of those places, and that adds to some challenge because logistics is so critical for any business in Saskatchewan. We're just geographically, we've got long distance to go to port. If you're in the business of aggregating anything from farms like we are, the nightmare of trying to figure out how to do that from hundreds of different farms in a short window of time is a challenge. I mean, it's great because once we figured it out, it's put us in a unique position. So it's been good for us, but it makes it challenging for new entrants, and I think that's something that we can continue to focus on: is how do we improve our our support for logistics. What can we do on the technology side there to better enable the fast movement and collection of goods, even within the province, and then certainly from Saskatchewan to around the world. So we're very fortunate to have the strong fundamentals that we do, and I think there are ways we can improve to unlock that potential even further.
Yeah, just so Ryan, just building on what Mark has shared. I mean, we talked earlier. You mentioned about the collaboration, right, and the value of collaboration, the importance of collaboration in the sector, and how that's really helped to propel the growth and just the advancement of some of these technologies. And do you want to just speak a little bit more to that?
To answer your question, I think, Kari, honestly, is the collaboration is interesting. And when Mark talks about transporting the goods, you think about a producer who has documented what he's done on his field with the flax, for example, and where the bales might be and where they're collected and where they need to go. I mean, there's many technologies available for fleet tracking devices, inventory management, and understanding. Collaboration off the start is really understanding what another individual's business is about. I feel, and how that can contribute to our business, how it would contribute to Mark's business, and ultimately the producer's business. And if we can understand those and figure out how we can contribute in a positive way with some technology, some service, to move that along faster rather than the mindset of compete, I think would help a lot, especially with the amount of energy in the ag tech space today. Are we all trying to solve a problem that exists or add value, as Leah spoke to earlier, and get to an appropriate end goal? And there's room for everybody to move this forward. But I think collaborating and understanding the purpose of each other's business up front and how we can work together is what's critical and maybe been overlooked a little bit in the past.
Can I add to that, Kari? Or maybe Leah,
Yeah,
you look like you might want to. I just quickly, I think that's a really good point, Ryan, about collaboration, right? And that's something that I missed in my talking about what makes Saskatchewan a great place to do business. And it's that fact. It's the fact that it is actually a relatively small place, and you can get everybody in the same room or on the same Zoom call to have conversations, and that we are a collaborative people that want to work together. And I think that we've certainly seen that as a startup business, that there's been a lot of support from all kinds of places that we wouldn't have anticipated. And so that, but it's essential to continue to invest in that collaboration and the communication part that you talked about too, and not just between businesses, but with governments and communities and Indigenous communities in particular. I mean, significant opportunities there, I think, for a lot of collaboration, and so that's a real success. And I think we can continue to invest in that as a province, then we'll be able to again, to unlock even more of that, because I think that's a really good point. So thanks, Ryan, for raising that.
Leah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, in speaking to Thomas, who's president and CEO of FHQ Developments, about sort of agriculture, he identified that, as they look at opportunities, it's wanting to ensure that the First Nations work to their advantages also. So, they're not, they are land, they have land, but maybe don't have the same sort of experience that, in the agriculture industry, we're celebrating, those farms that have been around for over 100 years. Whereas, he's talking about what are we going to do for the next 5 generations. And so as we think about collaboration, not just in Saskatchewan, but I think also with, First Nations and others, that, that collaboration is so very important. And it is looking at what does each party bring to the table, kind of what Ryan was saying about, how can we help each other? And I think about, how many, First Nations people are wanting to get into agriculture. And as somebody that has been in it for since I was, I've always been in it, I guess, is that I really welcome that opportunity, because the more people that understand agriculture and have a diversity of views as to how to ensure that we've got the land, the air, and the water for many generations, 5, 10, however many to come. The diversity of those views, I think, is going to make the agriculture industry and how we produce food that much better. And so, I'm really excited by this panel. I think that ag tech is one that necessitates diversity, and that if it was up to those of us that have been in the industry all of their lives, we're going to continue trying to, maybe do the same old. But as I said, the farmer fix, which has been so tremendous and great and has resulted in some of the best air seeder manufacturers, sorry, Brian, in the world, to be based out of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. I mean, that innovation is tremendous. And, when I look at, the path forward where it's more about operating systems and it's a different skill set, still very complementary to, you have to know how to farm and how to work the land and work with livestock, but it is a different and an evolving sort of skill set that's coming, and I'm very excited about that, and think there's lots of opportunity for those who like Mark don't come from an agriculture industry, but that's where we're saying come in and help us make the industry that much better.
Yeah, I that just brought up another thought for me when you were speaking there, Leah, and it's the whole area of skill sets and sort of what that is going to look like into the future. And I know that as part of this part of the conference, I believe John Stackhouse is going to be speaking on the Farmer 4.0. But I think that that's worth having a little bit of a discussion on here too, like in terms of, what is the farmer of the future, right? What does that look like? And the importance of, I'm again coming from Innovation Saskatchewan, we have a particular interest in understanding how technology is going to impact all sectors. And frankly, it kind of scares the bejesus out of me sometimes when I think about, the skills that our youth, and not only youth, but people that are currently working in these industries are going to need to have to be successful. And I think that that's no different when it comes to the agriculture industry. So yeah, what are some of the thoughts on that front?
The first thing that jumps out to me is the importance of being data literate, right? And I think that this is, it's not specific to skills that farmers need in the future. It's an essential life skill going forward, because we're getting increasing amounts of data thrown at us. I think it was Leah that made the point earlier about, the data has to have some relevance, and you have to be able to understand what it's telling you, and you have to be able to take that and then apply it to deliver, meaningful and performance improvements for your operation. And so, to me, data literacy is the first thing that jumps out for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'll jump in and help bridge to Ryan, because I know that he'll have a lot of good things to say here. But I was on that initial panel with John Stackhouse, and I applaud RBC for doing a study on what is Farmer 4.0, because the industry is changing, and it's not just the age of farmers. We've had a significant number of farmers leave the industry because their acres are too small to be able to, make a sustainable living with it. And so there's a fundamental shift in the size of the agriculture or of the farms. And I think that, when we look at the Farmer 4.0, she might be somebody that doesn't come from agriculture. It may be somebody that is, has a real desire to get into sustainable food, but is probably a better finance person than an actual laborer. And so again, when we look at the diversity of the industry, I think it has to, out of necessity of the shortage of labor, it has to move from what we've typically thought as sort of Farmer Joe. And there's all sorts of, pictures that, show a farmer that tends to be a middle-aged white man with a pitchfork, right? And I mean, for anybody that's in the farm industry, like we're like, no, that's not a farmer, because there is quite a bit of diversity. And I know Ryan would have seen a lot of that in his years. But that Farmer 4.0, I think, is really asking the right questions. Like, do we have the right skills? If we go to an autonomous tractor, and I'll just reflect a bit on when I was with Dot Technology Corp. Our biggest challenge wasn't necessarily do we have the technology to make this happen. It was the adoption of the technology by farmers who perhaps didn't have the confidence that this automated system is going to do what it says it will do. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, because I anticipate you've got a lot you could add on that.
I'll reflect on our pre-call discussion and on how all of this elevates to be, it could become a very lengthy discussion. But the excitement for me is really, you started, Kari, by asking the change of agriculture that I've seen over time. And you think about, I reflected on how the dealerships had to change, but everything Mark has mentioned and Leah has now mentioned is, how do we as a dealer group, regardless of your color, I mean, I'm here to represent the John Deere dealers across Western Canada today, but how do we position ourselves to answer the questions that Mark and Leah just asked? As a dealership, used to be parts and sales and service. Today we have an app developer today on staff. We have agronomists on staff. I can reflect to 2013 when we hired our first agronomist. In our trade area, we almost instantly became the competition. But in all reality, the goal for that agronomist on staff is to figure out that we are leveraging that piece of equipment or technology in the best agronomic fashion that we can. So we're trying to, how do we learn to make this machine the best it can be to fit on the farm from an agronomic perspective now today, and not just the equipment or cost of operation? How do we connect with the agronomist with our piece of equipment, and how do we connect with the grower? So the questions everybody's asked here today has shaped and changed the way our part of the contribution to the ag sector in Western Canada, or Saskatchewan in particular. It's changed how we've had to focus on that a lot. Integrated solutions is the department that I look after, and it's really to, how do we get our parts counter staff to understand, the data literacy that Mark referred to. Like, if somebody walks up to the front counter, 20 years ago it was to buy a cultivator shovel. Today it's to buy a GPS receiver or a chip or some component that might feed automation or autonomy, to Leah's point. I think one of the challenges for autonomy is, do we actually have a support network that's ready to support this out in the countryside? And what are the liability concerns and all that? It's an entirely different aspect to our industry that we don't think about as the pitchfork producer. And we're way beyond that. And the innovation that's come from Saskatchewan, I mean, home for me is not far from St. Brew. So you guys can all imagine the innovation near St. Brew, Saskatoon, with Flexi Coil, Seedhawk, Seedmaster, all of them, everybody's started here. And you look at the innovation they've all adopted over time into their manufacturing that started how many years ago? Years ago. So it's changed. These questions are fantastic to allow, I believe, the dealers that are serving the ag community and the producers to be properly prepared to work in the industry in the future.
Yeah. So, and again, this is one of the topics that we spoke about earlier prior to this, the panel here, was this whole issue of, and you raised it here, there's just different types of risks and that farmers have to consider. And specifically, we talked a little bit about the issue of data, right, and data protection. And I know, again, Ryan, not to have you dominating the discussion here, but I know this is an area that you have some particular thoughts on. So maybe we'll start with you, and then see if Mark and Leah want to add something.
Yeah, I guess just from some recent experience and some of the work we've done with data platforms and our own platform that we've worked on in-house is really the data transparency aspect. Is so the only organization that really has come to mind, or what we've really found in our work, has really been the Ag Data Transparency Seal that's really been originated in the U.S. And it's not a mandated component today, but it's a very good set of guidelines for somebody who's looking to start up in the ag tech space. But even a producer who's looking at a technology and concerned about, where's my data, who owns my data, that's an enormous discussion. But there's some very good basic guidelines to follow about transparency. And I think that's just what we have to keep an open mind on is, if I have a platform that I'm offering to Leah as a producer, her data is flowing into my platform. What is it that we're doing with the data? How is it being shared? Is it not being shared? Just there's very good things to consider that they've outlined. It would be what I would add to that question. Kari.
Thanks,
So
Ryan.
I don't know anybody
Mark,
else's thoughts are, but
yeah, Mark, how about you?
Yeah.
Like in terms of your experience, like in a value-added agriculture business, and how is data, I guess, becoming, and you did speak about it in terms of the skill sets needed, data literacy.
Yeah.
But what's been your experience in your particular situation?
I think that the data for an individual producer can be useful for them in terms of understanding their operations. But where it really becomes critical for any of us in a value-added role is in aggregate, right? And so we need to figure out how to balance data protection and privacy with the importance of aggregating that so that we can all benefit from our collective use of data and of tools, and so that's certainly something that we support and are looking for is how, and it's something that's essential to our success is that we need to be able to pull data from many producers all at once, ensuring that their individual information is protected, but that it's all available to us for our purposes. And we think that there's huge benefit that can come when we have good data protection rules in place, so that people have that confidence that they can share that, and that it really then can benefit the industry and beyond as a whole. So certainly something that we have benefited from already, and will continue to push for and encourage as best as we can.
Okay, thanks for that. Any thoughts that you have? Did you want to add, Leah? Okay. So I just to kind of switch gears a little bit, and as farmers have always been stewards of the land, and have and we've spoken a lot about the various techniques, whether it's zero-till seeding, what have you. How can technology impact not only primary production, but when you think about the value chain, or from a marketing perspective? Maybe Leah, if you can speak to that.
Okay, so just, how can technology impact primary production in terms of being better stewards of the land? Is that kind of what you're looking at?
Yeah, like I think it's the messaging around how we farmers have always been stewards of the land and have environmental aspects, or environmental concerns, and want to ensure that the land is protected. And so it's sort of a broader question about how is that message, how does technology continue to help with that, and from a supply chain and or marketing perspective as well?
Mm-hmm. So great question. I think this is an area where ag tech is absolutely, that term, when someone says, what is ag tech? Those that have been in the industry for quite a while, it's like, well, is it the shiny new maps? Is Ryan going to come out and like give me another monitor, or is there something else that's coming down the line? And so when I think about precision agriculture, and you've got, let's say, an acre or however many acres of land, and what is the count of the different sorts of plant species on that? Well, there can be millions of them. And so with, I think, technology as it's evolving, we've gone from when we go in and we're seeding or planting, that we know the depth of what is ideal for that specific grain or crop. And then the placement of the fertilizer is another area where, we don't just like throw it down, but we are a little more precise as to where exactly that fertilizer goes, where it is that it, when it's applied and how it's released. So, looking at the chemical and also the seed companies and what they've been able to achieve with some of their R&D, has, I think someone said to me that we produced more in the past 2 years in the prairies than we had in the previous 100 years combined. And I don't know, don't quote me on that one, because those numbers I could be very wrong on. But the core message behind that is that we've seen tremendous yield increases in the last couple of years. And so when I think about, being stewards of the land, the water, the air, the opportunity is to reduce inputs like your spraying, like your fertilizer, and to really make them precise so that they're doing what you're asking of them, as opposed to doing a broad application, knowing that you're going to waste some of that, but that overall the crop will prosper. So I think that's that is a real opportunity. The challenge is that to get that amount of precision is exceptionally expensive. And so, that is where there's a lot of research going on. Some of it by Pami, others are looking at, where are the economies of scale to be able to use technology in a cost-effective way. So that's kind of where I would see it, as going from sort of a broad, application, just throwing stuff into the ground or on top of the seeds, to becoming very precise about what it is. And you see that in other areas like the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industry, where we're seeing precision medicine, that, you can have a specific type of cell deviation. And if we know that, and it is linked to a certain type of cancer, then the cancer treatment goes after that, as opposed to blocking out everything in one's immune system. So, perhaps not the best comparison, but when I think about precision agriculture, it's moving away from throwing everything down in the hopes that on average you get everything, but being even more specific about how much spray to put down or how much fertilizer, etc. I don't know, Ryan, I may have just butchered that and trying to simplify it, but, or Mark.
Mark,
No,
I'd be interested. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was just going to add, I think, as we talk about ag tech and I look at the position I am in today, fortunately, our equipment since 2012 has had telematics on board, which speaks to the benefits that Leah spoke to. It really is, where are you placing your fertilizer? How much have you put on? And can we see that data real time? And I mentioned earlier the benefit of precision ag with auto steer. If we can all relate to auto steer very easily, the comfort level is for the operator. But you think about the evolution of the farm today and the stakeholders in the farm today, regardless of your position, if you're a landowner or you're a lender or risk management, whatever position you play, the tools available today allow you to monitor a lot of this real time. So what is my grain inventory real time? What's my fertilizer inventory real time? what's my air temperature. We're dealing with moisture probes now. So from a water perspective, we know how hot it got this summer and the impact that the heat has had on some crops across Western Canada. And you think about livestock production and the feed for livestock. So we're connected to all of the live data, and that's one thing that ag tech is really going to help us sort out. But it's going to require the different skill set. Is how do we take the aggregated data, to Mark's point, really put it to additional insightful use? Like, if we're working with the producer, I'll speak to the collaboration now for Mark that's growing flax, and we've got a good agronomist on staff, and we're getting the seeds planted where we need it for seed depth, and the soil temperature's there to germinate, and we handle that crop through the season. As we spray it, we can actually document through the system that's embedded all the herbicides that were applied or any fungicides that were applied, and then as we harvest it, what is the yield outcome of the straw from Mark? Traditionally we focus on yield in bushels or pounds of the product for Mark's company, which is a saleable item for the producer, is the straw. So with bale tracking devices and location and inventory, that's how I think it's going to impact. It is impacting those things today.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
funny. Sorry, I was just going to say, Kari, it's funny. I mean, Prairie Clean Energy has had good conversations with Innovation Saskatchewan. We're working with Pami now. It seems like I have to talk to Ryan. So I love this. I mean, this is the collaboration that comes, right? That there's and that's what makes Saskatchewan so wonderfully unique. And if I can just add one perspective on this question, it's not so much on the technology side, but it's on the point about farmers as stewards of the land and looking to protect the environment. And, I think those of us in Saskatchewan, whether you come from agricultural background or not, recognize that and know that that's true. I think that's still a perception. I think there's a different perception outside of Saskatchewan or outside of the prairies when it comes to farming practices. When we talk to Bay Street investors or others, they still think of farming as a very environmentally questionable practice in some cases, right? And I think that there's a need to continue to shift that perception. As a new company into the marketplace, when we started meeting with producers last year and talking about what we could do and how we could collaborate with them, the genuine level of enthusiasm, not because they could make money from residue, but because they could stop burning something in the field, right, and start doing something productive with it. It was a tremendous feedback from producers, and I think that just speaks to the genuine commitment to improving the environment and wanting to do that and recognizing some of the risks of that practice, but simply not really having any other viable options today. And so it's certainly something in our conversations that we have about Saskatchewan and about agriculture around the world, but even particularly in more urban areas of Canada, we're working to help change that perception, and I think that's something we can all continue to do together.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, Mark brought up a really exciting thing for me is, we pride ourselves in the ag industry of our accomplishments, but when you reflect on the comment Mark just made, is how much do we actually share that outside of agriculture? In all reality, in our day-to-day role, how do we share that and be excited about that outside of our regular role? I can grab my phone and I can actually see live right now where equipment is, the product that's being applied, real time. And so you think about your comment, Mark, is somebody that's outside of agriculture looking at food traceability, who's partnered with a producer or our large group, could look on here live today and feel comfortable about agriculture. How much fuel are they burning? How much chemical are they using? How much inventory are they producing? How much food are they producing for the reduced amount of inputs that compared to the past? Like our bushels per nutrient applied today, Leah spoke to it. We've produced how much food in the last 2 years compared to the previous, but we don't celebrate that outside of our industry. And you just triggered that, Mark, as you spoke a few minutes ago, and it's here at the fingertips of my phone. And that's the collaboration. If you've got somebody, a stakeholder in the business, and if it's at the end of the value chain, where the producers at the front end of the value chain, we need to connect that. And today we're fortunate to have access to those tools. We just have to express them and share them outside of our day-to-day focus that we have at the dealership or across Western Canada. So yes, Mark, we should talk.
All right, thanks for that addition, Ryan. Leah, did you want to?
Yeah, just on the element of farmers and talking and whatnot. Edelman does a really good job of identifying who it is that's believed. And I think throughout the pandemic, we saw a real divergent in terms of like chief medical officers. Absolutely, there's confidence in them. The other people that enjoy and are typically well situated in terms of being believed is farmers. And so, when we look at Farm Credit Canada's, pulling up of farmers that are giving, talking about what they do, or there's a young woman, Maddie, who's been talking about what happens on her farm, and she's a social media superstar, like Quick Dick McDick, who another social media superstar. I'm probably spending too much time on Twitter here, but these are people that are doing a great job of talking about what they do on a day-to-day basis, and then revealing it. So I spent of my 20 some years in working, I spent most of it in Quebec. And when I introduced my husband to some of my really good friends in Montreal, the first question they asked when they found out he was a farmer, they said, "Oh, so are you an organic farmer?" And he was like, "Oh my God, no." Now, that is my husband's perspective, is that he likes to use the technology of seeds and spraying and whatnot. But it was interesting for me because had I been asked that same question, do you do organic or conventional, I would have said, well, conventional. Now there's all sorts of room for a conversation about organic and non-organic, but the beauty of it is that we are able to use that trusted perspective of farmers and have good conversations about where does your food come from, how is it grown. And the beauty of first world problems is we have choices in food, right? And so we think back to the 80s when there was a major world shortage in Ethiopia, and people aren't asking, do you want an organic made apple or a non-organic? They just want an apple. They just want food. And so I think, a little bit of a great news story in agriculture is that farmers are trusted in terms of their opinions, but we can and should be having those conversations about where does your food come from, because we can start to, and I think that's where the future of some of the grains that are being grown is, you can say, this beer came from such and such a place. This is where the oats, or this is where the barley came from. And, moving forward, a lot of the durum is grown in Saskatchewan. And so there's ways of being able to kind of raise the profile of how agriculture operates and why it is a strong and sustainable, economically viable option. And we want everybody to get involved in it because it's fun.
Yes, it is fun. You're absolutely right, Leah. So I know we're coming up on our time here. So what I'd like to do, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the purpose really of today and the theme and our objective, I think, was really to provide some insight into, the impact of technology on an evolving sector, as well as the opportunities, right? And I think that's I hope that that's something that we've been able to instill on those who are listening. I guess I'd just like to pose one last question to each of you before we wrap up, and it's just around. So, for a community, for a First Nation who is, interested in venturing into this foray, so to speak, what advice would you provide to them on how to get started? And maybe, Leah, I'll start with you this time.
Well, I think it starts with, what advice I don't know, I feel like giving advice is never a good idea on my part. Unless I'm in that other person's shoes. And so I guess, in speaking with, I'll refer back to my conversation with Thomas about, what is it that, the opportunities for the First Nations communities, and, where do you want to be? And what is your passion? Because if your passion is growing food, there's a variety of ways that you can get in to agriculture, whether it's as a farmer or it's, getting into servicing of equipment, into doing financing. There's a whole bunch of different areas. And, the one, I guess, opportunity I hope that people would consider is, if you're interested in farming, go and talk to a farmer. They often are very proud of what they do. And in that way you can figure out a path forward. I would welcome anybody to come to the Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute to learn more about the R&D aspect of what we do. We can't reveal everything, but it all, I think, starts with having a conversation with some people that are pretty passionate. And so I'd welcome them to come in and either see our facility or to have a conversation with myself, or I can recommend other people also.
Thanks, Leah. Mark.
Sure, thanks. I talked about earlier on about how agriculture is Saskatchewan's business, and I think that that's fundamentally true. I also think it's fundamentally true that Saskatchewan's future is Indigenous, and we cannot have any conversations in Saskatchewan about our economic future or the opportunities that exist without talking about how not only does that need to integrate and involve Indigenous people, but it needs to be led by Indigenous people. And so there's an ongoing transformation that needs to continue to happen. We talked about the importance of collaboration and communication, and that's how you get to any kind of meaningful engagement. And so, I look to some non-Indigenous communities that are doing great work in this area, like the city of Melville, for instance, that's really doing some fantastic things in positioning themselves to be a hub for the agricultural economy. And I would, encourage First Nations in that area, if this is the space that you're interested in, to have conversations with the city of Melville, as an example, to reach out to organizations like Innovation Saskatchewan, to Pami, to Ryan, or to myself, or to any companies that are out there that are looking to have activity in this space. We're always looking for meaningful partnerships, and I think that as a province and as an industry, we need to continue to drive towards greater, and not just, as I said, Indigenous engagement, but also Indigenous leadership in the space, because the potential there is just unlimited for what we can achieve as a province when we're really aligned with that.
Thanks, Mark. And Ryan, last word to you. Share your vast experience with us.
A lot of words were spoken that I would have shared, but I think my question to them would, depending on, their position in life or their position in the community, like what position do they really want to play in the agricultural space is a question I would ask. Like, you think about their youth and their education path today. We talked about mechanics and ag tech and the development that's required. So it looks different today than it did 5 years ago, and a lot different than it did 15 years ago. So, from a dealership perspective, I guess is what I'll share is between parts and sales and service and technology and agronomy are all areas that we play a role in the ag community today at our dealerships across Western Canada and Canada. And, with the technology that we have at our fingertips through the John Deere network today, really lets a landowner become part of that agricultural space today and be connected live. I think that's a different perspective that we didn't have even 5 years ago. We know what connectivity is like in rural Saskatchewan for cellular coverage. That's improved immensely through a lot of work that SaskTel and everybody's put into, and we can be connected now to the live production steps as a landowner. Maybe if they just want to be an investor into some of those value-added chain components like Mark's involved in. I think they need to understand what position they want to play and know that they're welcome in that community. I think that's the most important piece. Mark said, talk to Leah, talk to the dealership, talk to groups like Mark, talk to Innovation Saskatchewan. There's lots of energy. Big announcements this week through the ag tech investment right in the province. That's a fantastic announcement, and just consider what position you want to play in and come into it with passion. Entering something that you're not passionate about never has a successful ending. So, but there's lots of opportunity in ag is all I can say. Lots.
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, thanks to everybody who's joined us today for this discussion. I hope that our panelists here have inspired and provided some advice or information on all the opportunities that we do have in the ag tech space. And so I also want to thank Mark, Leah, and Ryan for taking time today as well. And as has been stated, please, anybody feel free to reach out to any of the four of us, and we'd be happy to work with you. So with that, I guess I will sign off.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.